My name is Lydia Crane. When I was 7 years old, my mother repainted my bedroom without asking me. She chose beige. Not the warm kind. The kind that looks like something drained of color, like the walls just gave up. She said it was neutral. She said neutral was practical. What she meant was that my room didn't matter enough to think about. My brother's room was navy blue with white trim. He had picked it himself. He was 5. I am telling you this because I want you to understand that it started that early, not with cruelty, with indifference. And indifference, I have learned, leaves a different kind of mark than cruelty does. Cruelty you can point to. Indifference just quietly teaches you that you don't exist. They called me the responsible one. They said it like a compliment. I was 12 when I started making dinner on the nights my mother worked late. I was 14 when I figured out how to read the utility bills and leave them on my father's desk with the due dates circled. I was 16 when my brother totaled my father's car and I spent the night at the hospital with him while my parents drove from their friend's lake house 3 hours away, and when they arrived, my mother walked past me to put her arm around my brother's shoulders without a word to me. Not thank you. Not we're glad you were with him. Nothing. I had been there for 6 hours. I had given the nurse his insurance information. I had called the tow truck. I told myself they were scared. I told myself people forget to say things when they're frightened. I told myself this for a long time. My father sold hardware. My mother did bookkeeping for 3 small businesses out of a home office that smelled like printer ink and old coffee. We lived in a subdivision outside of Columbus, Ohio, where every house had the same footprint and different shutters. Ours were green. I used to look at them from the school bus and feel a strange sinking. Not sadness exactly. More like the feeling of wearing shoes that almost fit. My brother's name is Derek. He is 2 years younger than me. He was a beautiful child. Dark eyes, easy laugh, the kind of kid who walked into rooms and made people look up. I don't say this to be unfair to him. It's just true. He was magnetic in the way some people simply are, and my parents orbited him like they couldn't help it, like gravity. I didn't hate him for it. Not then. I was just tired. I got into the University of Michigan on a partial merit scholarship. I had applied to 8 schools and gotten into 6. I told my parents at dinner on a Tuesday in March. My father nodded and said that was a state school, wasn't it? And my mother asked if Derek had finished his history project yet. Derek had not finished his history project yet. The conversation moved on. I excused myself and washed the dishes. There was no celebration. No cake. I didn't expect one by then. I had stopped expecting things from them around the time I stopped leaving my report cards on the kitchen counter. But still, 6 schools, a scholarship, a Tuesday. I packed for Ann Arbor mostly alone. My mother helped me make a list of things to buy at Target. My father drove me to the airport and hugged me briefly in the departures lane, the engine still running. Derek had not come. He had a baseball scrimmage. The first semester, I cried twice and studied constantly and ate a lot of peanut butter crackers because the dining hall hours didn't match my lab schedule. By spring, I had stopped crying and started building something that felt, for the first time, like a life that was actually mine. I had friends who texted to check on me. A professor who remembered my name between classes. A small desk by the window of my dorm room where I studied with the lamp on, and the radiator clicking and thought, this is okay. This is actually okay. I majored in industrial design. I loved the way it lived between engineering and art. The way a good design was both logical and felt. The way you could hold something someone made and understand something about how they thought. I graduated with honors. No one flew out for the ceremony. My mother sent a card that arrived 2 days late. Inside she had written, "Proud of you, Lydia," with an exclamation point that somehow made it worse. Dare texted a thumbs up emoji at 11 at night. I moved to Chicago after graduation. I had a job offer from a mid-sized product design consultancy on the North Side, not glamorous, not a name anyone knew, but real work with real clients and a salary that covered my rent with a little left over. I shared an apartment with a woman named Gemma who worked in hospital administration and kept very clean and made excellent soup on Sundays. I liked my life. It was small and quiet, and it belonged to me. I worked hard, the way I had always worked hard, the way that had never been acknowledged at home but had apparently made me very good at my job. Within 2 years, I was leading client projects. Within 2 years, I was the point person for 2 of the firm's largest accounts. I didn't tell my family about any of it, not because I was hiding it, but because the conversations always looped back to Derek, his new apartment, his girlfriend, his promotion at the marketing firm where he'd worked for 8 months. My mother could spend 40 minutes on a call telling me about Derek's new couch. I learned to say, and look at the ceiling and wait for it to end. Then, I met someone. His name was Patrick. He was a structural engineer who made bad puns and excellent coffee and had the kind of patience I had never understood how people came to have. We dated for 2 years. We moved in together. He proposed on an ordinary Sunday morning in our kitchen, not down on one knee, just slid a ring across the breakfast table and said, "I want to keep doing this with you if you want to." I said yes before I finished reading his expression. We set the date for the following October. His family was warm and chaotic and loud in the best way, and they welcomed me in the way I had not known families could. His mother hugged me and meant it. His father asked about my work and listened to the answer. I cried in the car on the way home after that first dinner, and Patrick held my hand on the gear shift and didn't ask me to explain. My family was invited. Of course they were. My parents, Derek, his girlfriend at the time, a woman with a high laugh who I had met once at Christmas and who managed to turn every conversation back to herself within 30 seconds. I bought my dress in March. A soft ivory with an open back, nothing dramatic, just the kind of thing that made me feel exactly like myself. I called my mother in April, 6 months before the wedding, to talk through logistics. She mentioned, without preface, that Derek was thinking about proposing to his girlfriend around the same time as my wedding. I said, "Oh, congratulations for when that happens." She said she hoped our dates wouldn't conflict. I said they couldn't conflict. Mine was already set and had been for 4 months. She said yes, but Derek hadn't had a chance to plan yet. I held the phone away from my face for a moment and looked at the wall and breathed. I said the date wasn't changing. She changed the subject. Derek did not propose. The girlfriend left him in August. My mother called me to tell me he was devastated, that he was really struggling, that I should call him. I sent Derek a text. He didn't respond for 4 days, and when he did it was 2 words, "I'm fine." I put my phone down and went back to the seating chart. The wedding was in October. It was a small venue, a converted warehouse in Logan Square with exposed brick and Edison lights and big windows that looked out on a courtyard. 40 people. Our closest friends, Patrick's family, my family. The ceremony was in the afternoon. I had been getting ready since 10 in the morning with Gemma and my 2 college friends, and by 3 o'clock I was standing in the bridal suite in the dress, and I feel embarrassed saying this, but I felt genuinely beautiful. Not performing it, actually feeling it. My mother arrived at 2:30. She came into the bridal suite without knocking, looked at me in the dress and said, "Oh, ivory is tricky on you, isn't it? You should have done champagne." She said it like she was being helpful. Gemma took a very deliberate step closer to me. One of my college friends found something very important to look at on the other side of the room. I said nothing. I smoothed the front of the dress with both hands and looked at myself in the mirror. And I said I like it. My mother shrugged and asked where she could put her wrap. The ceremony was beautiful. Patrick cried a little when I walked in and tried to look like he wasn't. His vows included a bad pun and everyone laughed, and then he said the real thing underneath it, the quiet, true thing, and I had to look up at the ceiling for a moment so I didn't ruin my makeup. At the reception, my father gave a toast. He talked about responsibility and good values. He did not mention a single specific memory. He did not say her name once in a way that wasn't transitional. He said I was always very determined. Determined. Like I was a problem that had stuck around long enough to become a feature. Then Derek stood up. He had not been asked to speak. He just stood up, tapped his glass, and began. He talked for 6 minutes. I timed it after from the video. He talked about himself mostly, his memories of childhood, a story about him and me that was actually a story about him in which I appeared briefly to hand him something, a joke about how weddings made him think about his own future. He said he always knew I'd find someone, that I'd been so focused, so serious, it was good I could finally relax. He said it warmly. That was the worst part. He meant it warmly. He thought he was being kind. Patrick's mother put her hand on my arm during the last 2 minutes of it. She didn't say anything. She just put her hand there and kept it there. When Derek finished, he raised his glass and said to my little sister, who finally got her happy ending, like I had been waiting, like this was the conclusion of a long holding pattern, like my life before Patrick had been a prologue. I smiled. I raised my glass. I kept my mouth closed and looked at the Edison lights and thought, I will remember this. Not in the burning way, in the recording way. After dinner, my mother found me near the bar. She was 2 glasses of wine and not drunk, just softened. She took my hands and held them and said, You did well, Lydia. You did really well. Like it was a performance review, like she was checking something off. I said, Thank you. What else do you say? On the drive to the hotel that night, Patrick said, Are you okay? I said yes. He said, What did Derek's toast actually mean? I laughed, which surprised me. A full, real laugh. And I leaned my head against the window and watched the city go by. And I thought about the dress and the courtyard and the way Patrick had looked at me when I came through the door. And I thought, they can't touch this. Whatever they do, they can't touch this. But I had learned something that night that I wrote down in my journal later, back in the hotel room while Patrick slept. I wrote, They will always take the room. If you give them any space at all, they will fill it with themselves. Stop giving them space. I went back to work Monday. I had been working for the past 14 months on something that was not yet ready to have a name. I had been developing it after hours, on weekends, in the early mornings before Patrick was awake. A design consultancy of my own, not a side project, not a hobby, a real thing with a structure and a client model and a specific approach that I believed in. My work at the consultancy had taught me something. Large firms oversold strategy and underdelivered on actual product sense. They brought in beautiful decks and left clients with systems that looked good in presentations and failed in people's hands. I wanted to do the opposite. Small clients, deep work, designs tested against real users before they ever reached production. I wanted to build something that was more like a workshop than an agency. I had 2 clients before I left my job. Small ones, a non-profit that needed a donor-facing app redesigned, a local food brand that wanted better packaging. They were paying me modest rates for nights and weekends, but they were paying me, and they were referring me to other people. I left the consultancy in February, 16 months after the wedding. I did not make a fuss about it. I gave my notice, stayed through my transition period, trained the person taking over my accounts, and walked out on a Thursday with a box of desk things and a plant I had kept alive for 3 years. Patrick met me outside with coffee and said, Now what? And I said, Now what? And I said, Now we find out. I named the studio Groundwork. Not glamorous, but accurate. That was the point. The first year was lean. I worked from our second bedroom, which had a window that faced the back of the building next door and let in approximately 40 minutes of direct sunlight per day. I ate lunch at my desk almost every day. Patrick brought me tea without being asked. I had 4 clients by summer, 6 by fall, and by the following spring, I had taken on a junior designer and moved into a small shared studio space in Wicker Park with 2 other small firms. I did not tell my family any of this, not about leaving the consultancy, not about Groundwork, not about the clients or the studio or the junior designer. When my mother called, I said work was going well. She said that's great and moved on to Derek, who had started his own thing too, a social media marketing company. He had a logo. He had an Instagram. My mother described his branding with the reverence usually reserved for architecture. In my second year, Groundwork was selected for a Regional Design Award, a small industry recognition, not the kind of thing that makes the news, but meaningful, a juried selection that put our work in front of people whose opinions shaped the field. I went to the ceremony in Milwaukee with my junior designer, Yemi, and we sat at a round table with other small studios. And when they called our name, I walked up to the front and accepted a small glass cube and said thank you into the microphone and felt, in that moment, entirely located. Present. Real. I put the cube on my desk the next morning next to the plant. In my third year, Groundwork landed its first large client, a healthcare company expanding its patient-facing digital products. The contract was the largest I had ever signed, a number I am not going to say out loud, but that changed what was possible. I brought on 2 more designers. I moved us into a proper studio in River North with actual conference rooms and a printer that worked reliably. I still didn't tell my family. My mother called in March to tell me Derek's marketing company had taken on its first corporate client. She was breathless with it. She described his office, which was apparently a WeWork space, and his team, which was apparently 2 people, and his vision, and I sat on my kitchen floor leaning against the cabinet. I don't know why I sat on the floor. I just did, and I said, and great, and I'm so happy for him, and I stared at the ceiling. When she finally paused and asked how I was, I said I was well. She said good, and went back to Derek. I put my head back against the cabinet for a moment after we hung up, and then I stood up and went back to the contract review I had been in the middle of. In my 4th year, I was approached about an acquisition. A mid-sized design and technology firm out of Boston had been watching Groundwork's work in the healthcare space. They were expanding their practice and liked our methodology, the real user testing framework, the deep product integration, the way our designs measurably reduced client support tickets. They sent an initial inquiry through a mutual contact. I read it twice, put it in a folder, and told no one. 6 months of conversations followed. I had a lawyer. I was careful. I was, by then, practiced at building things quietly and taking the time to make sure they were real before I said them out loud. The deal closed on a Thursday in September. The terms were private. What I will tell you is that it was enough to do the thing I had been thinking about since the 3rd year of Groundwork. The thing I had been looking at listings for on Sunday mornings with my coffee and my laptop, while Patrick slept, the top 2 floors of a building in River North. A duplex penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and a rooftop terrace that faced north toward the lake. I had walked through it once with a realtor, casually, the way you do when you're not quite ready to believe something is real. The realtor had said it was a remarkable space. I had said yes, and touched the window glass and thought, someday. I wired the down payment the week after the acquisition closed. I did not tell my family. The reason I went to my brother's wedding is harder to explain than it should be. He had met someone new after the ex-girlfriend, a woman who seemed, from what I could tell, genuinely good for him. Calm where he was, loud, specific, where he was vague. They had been together 3 years. I liked her more than I had liked most people associated with my family. The invitation came in a cream envelope. My mother had added a handwritten note at the bottom. It wouldn't be the same without you, Lydia. She still wrote my name like she was signing a permission slip. I went. It was at a country club outside Columbus, the kind of place with a long driveway and valets and white linens on every surface. I wore a dark green dress and drove myself from the airport and felt, pulling into the parking lot, the particular feeling of returning to a place that had never quite been home. My mother met me at the entrance. She looked me over in the way she always did, not quite appraising, not quite approving, just cataloging, and said, "You look nice." I said, "Thank you." She said, "Derek is so happy you came," as if I was a surprise guest, as if I had not RSVP'd 3 months ago. Inside, the room was full of Derek's world. His friends from college, people from his company, his girlfriend's family, various cousins and neighbors and people I had never met. I found my table, which was near the back, and I found my father there already, nursing a soda water. He stood when he saw me and hugged me, which surprised me. He held on a beat longer than usual. He said, "You look well," and I said, "So do you." And then we ran out of things to say and sat down. The ceremony was sweet. Derek cried. His wife, her name is June, And I liked her from the moment she said something dry and funny under her breath during the coordinator's instructions, looked at him like she had made the right decision. I was glad for them. I meant that. At dinner, my mother gave a toast. She talked for 8 minutes. She told 3 stories about Derek as a child. She mentioned me once, in a subordinate clause, and Lydia, who's always been so independent. Independent. There it was again. The elegant word for alone. I sipped my wine. Then Derek spoke. He thanked everyone, thanked his wife, thanked her family, thanked his friends. He got to our parents and teared up genuinely, which I respected. Then he turned to me at my table near the back, and he said, "And I want to be exact about this, because the exact words matter, and my sister Lydia, who I know has been doing her quiet little thing up in Chicago. We're proud of you, Lyd. Quiet little thing. Quiet little thing." He was smiling when he said it. He thought it was affectionate. He thought he was being generous, acknowledging me, making sure I wasn't left out. He had no idea. That's the thing about being invisible to people. They don't know they can't see you. They think what they're looking at is the whole picture. I smiled. I nodded. I looked at the centerpiece. After dinner, my mother found me near the coat check. She had that look she got sometimes when the wine had made her candid in a way she'd regret later. She took my arm and walked me to a quieter corner of the room and said, "Genuinely, I think she meant this. I hope you know we love you, Lydia. We're just different, you and I." I looked at her. I thought about the beige paint. I thought about the airport engine running. I thought about the Wednesday I presented at a healthcare conference in front of 300 people and come home to a voicemail from her about Derek's WeWork. I said I know. I did not stay for the dessert course. At the airport, I changed my flight to the first available to Chicago, which left at 9, and got me home just before midnight. In the Uber from O'Hare, I looked at my phone and read through the confirmation email for the River North closing, which was set for the following Friday. The unit number, the floor, the address. I put the phone face down on the seat beside me and looked out the window at the highway lights and thought about the window in my Wicker Park studio, the one with 40 minutes of sun. I thought about my beige bedroom in Columbus. I thought about the drive to the airport when I left for Ann Arbor, the engine running, no wave goodbye. I thought, I built the whole thing while they weren't looking. Every year they didn't ask, I was building. Every call that ended without my name in it, I was building. Every call that ended without my name in it, I was building. Every quiet little thing. I signed the closing documents on a Friday morning in a conference room in the Loop. My lawyer sat across from me. The realtor sat beside her. I wore the dark green dress again because I felt like it and because no one could tell me not to. I signed my name 12 times and initialed 9 more times, and when the last page was turned and the realtor slid the key fob across the table, I held it in my palm for a moment and just sat with it. My lawyer said, "Congratulations, Lydia." I said, "Thank you." I meant it. The penthouse was empty when I walked in. The movers weren't coming until the next week. It was just the space. The wide, pale floors, the windows, the skyline through the glass in the late afternoon light, the rooftop stairs, the lake visible in the distance like a rumor of something larger. I walked through every room. I stood at the north window for a long time. It was quiet in the way that spaces are quiet before they become yours. Not empty, just waiting. I didn't call anyone. I went home to Patrick and told him. He said, "Can we go see it?" And I said, "Tomorrow?" And he said, "Okay." And then he ordered pizza, and we sat on the couch and he asked me every question he'd been too careful to ask during the acquisition process, and I answered all of them. And it felt like exhaling after holding my breath for a very long time. My brother's wife found me on Instagram a month later. She sent a message that was sweet and brief. "I've been thinking about what Derek said at the reception, and I want you to know I don't think that. I think you've built something real. I don't know exactly what. He doesn't either, but I can tell. I hope we can be close." She signed it June. I replied, "I'd like that. Let's have dinner next time you're in Chicago." I meant it. Derek texted me 2 weeks after that. He said, "Hey, I heard through the grapevine you moved. Big place? I said I bought something, yes. He said nice congrats, Lyd. Like I had gotten a good parking spot. I said thanks. He said let me know if you need any help with the marketing side of things. LOL. I put the phone down and stood at the north window and watched a boat move very slowly across the lake, and I felt something loosen in me. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but the beginning of understanding that his smallness was not a verdict on me. It never had been. I had just been standing too close to see it clearly. My mother called on a Sunday in November. She had that careful tone she used when she had been thinking about something for several days. She said she'd heard I had made some changes, and that someone had mentioned my company to a friend of hers, and she wanted to know, her exact words, if I was doing all right financially. I held the phone against my shoulder and looked at the signed copy of the acquisition agreement in the frame on the wall. Not for display, just because I needed somewhere to put it. I said, yes, Mom. I'm doing all right. She said, I'm glad. She said you always worried me with how serious you were. I said, I was never worried. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, you know we're proud of you. I said, I know. She said, I don't think I said that enough. It was the closest thing to an apology she had ever offered. It was 5 words in the middle of a Sunday phone call that she would probably not repeat. It landed somewhere in me. Not where it would have if she had said it when I was 12, clearing dinner plates. Not with the weight it might have carried on the Tuesday in March when I got into 6 schools. But it landed. I said, thank you, Mom. Then she asked if I had talked to Derek recently, and I said no, and the conversation moved on. That is the thing about some families. You don't get the moment, the clean reversal, the acknowledgement, the camera turning towards you at last. You don't always get it. What you get, if you are patient, and if you are building, and if you keep your head down and do the work, is something quieter and more durable. You get to stand in your own space and know how it was made. You get to hold the key fob and feel its weight and know that every year they missed, every call they cut short, every loud little thing of your brothers that eclipsed you, none of it stopped you. You were never waiting for their permission. You didn't know that for a while, but you know it now. The rooftop terrace faces north toward the lake. I go up there sometimes in the morning when it's early enough that the city is just waking up. I bring my coffee. I look at the water. I think about the scholarship I set up this year. A small thing, through the design program at Michigan, for first-generation students in product design. I named it after nothing in particular. No family story attached. Just a number in a fund and a panel of people who read applications and pick someone who is good and wasn't expected to be, and give them the same thing I had to manufacture for myself, the chance to find out what they can do without someone telling them not to bother. I don't need them to see it to know it's real. I already know. If you've ever been told that what you were doing was a quiet little thing, I want to hear about it. Leave me a comment. Sometimes the smallest dismissals are the ones that start the largest engines. I've been thinking lately about what it actually costs to be overlooked for a long time. Not the obvious costs, not the loneliness, which is real, or the low-grade exhaustion of performing okayness on phone calls that were never really about you. I mean the subtler thing, the way you can internalize someone else's estimate of your worth and start to move through the world as if it's accurate. As if the beige paint they chose for your room says something true about you. As if the engine left running at the curb was a fair assessment. I did that for years. I called it being realistic. I called it not having expectations. What it actually was, I think, is that I had absorbed the signal they were sending and mistaken it for signal about me, when it was only ever signal about them. What changed me wasn't one moment. It wasn't Derek's toast at my wedding, though that clarified something I had been circling for a long time. It wasn't even standing in that empty penthouse with the key fob in my hand, though that was the closest I've come to feeling a chapter close in real time. What changed me was the accumulation of all the mornings I got up anyway. All the clients I served well when no one was watching. All the work I did in the second bedroom with 40 minutes of sun, building something that had no name yet but that I believed in because I had thought it through carefully and tested it honestly, and it kept turning out to be right. That's the thing about integrity, and I mean the structural kind, the engineering kind, The kind that means a thing holds up under load. You build it in the ordinary moments, not the dramatic ones. Derek's toast was a dramatic moment, but my response to it wasn't. My response was to get on a plane and go home and keep working. That's the whole answer. That's the whole story, if I'm honest about it. I think about Lydia at 12, circling due dates on utility bills and leaving them on her father's desk. I think about how much intelligence and discipline and care that took from a child, quietly, with no instruction and no recognition. And I think that person always had everything she needed. She just needed time and distance and her own window to work at. What the people who dismiss you are actually telling you, and this took me a long time to understand, is something about the limits of their vision, not the limits of your potential. My mother couldn't see groundwork because she wasn't looking. My brother couldn't see it because he'd already decided what I was. That's not a reflection of what I built. It's a reflection of the size of the frame they were working with. The cause and effect of my life, if I trace it honestly, runs like this. I was told I was the responsible one, so I became responsible. I was told to manage myself, so I learned to manage myself. So I learned to work without needing the room. Every dismissal pointed me further inward, toward the actual work, away from the performance of it. I didn't plan it that way. But that's how it went. If you are somewhere in the middle of that, if you are in the second bedroom phase, the 40 minutes of sun phase, the on the phone while looking at the ceiling phase, I just want to say, keep the records, not for revenge, for yourself. Because the day you stand somewhere that you built and you can trace every step of how you got there, that clarity is its own kind of wealth. Nobody can take an understanding away from you. It's the one thing that's fully yours. June said, I think you've built something real. She said it without knowing the number. She said it because she could tell. That's what real work looks like from the outside. Not loud, not decorated, just solid, just there. Build the solid thing. The rest figures itself out.